What's good, world? It's your boy SK74. What's good? As you see, your boy here with a review today. As you see, it say the Sandman. It's scarier than you think, I guess. I don't know. I was always curious about this topic as a kid. Like, what the fuck is Sandman? But I guess we'll see this a little story about how that goes now. So let's start this.
Imagination. About understanding your imagination, appreciating it, putting it to use. There's so much to celebrate about this amazing thing you can do with your head that we often sort of neglect its dark side. Oh yes, it can be very dark. And there's a story I read recently which really helped me to remember that. One you probably haven't heard yet, but that you've almost certainly heard of. The original German fairy tale, The Sandman by E.T.A. Hoffmann. Buckle up, because this one is probably far different from what you're expecting.
Also, I'm gonna put the video link in the
Before we
description.
get started with this video, there's a book I really have to recommend. The Golem and the Jinni by Helene Wecker, which is about a golem who loses her master and has to figure out how to be a person, if that's even possible for her. The recommendation will make a lot of sense as we get further into this video, but right now you can get it for free thanks to our sponsor, Audible. Visit the link in the description or go to audible.com/talefoundry to get started.
This game, you're not ready for it.
Our story opens onto the life of a promising young man pursuing his dreams. Between his steady progress in college, a fine skill with poetry and philosophy, the love of his beautiful and intelligent fiancée, Clara, our Nathaniel seems to be well on track toward great things. But there is a complication. Despite the current path of his life, things have not always been so easy for him. There is a darkness in his mind, waiting to be unleashed. And one day, while about his business in town, he comes across a man who does just that. The merchant, Coppola. To most, this man is but a simple barometer dealer, hucking glassware and instruments from his cart. To Nathaniel, he's far more than that. When Nathaniel was a boy, he was told the tale of the Sandman, a strange figure who would come in the night to sprinkle sand into the eyes of children who refused to sleep. And not the magical sleep sand you've seen in so many adaptations either. The sand in this story would make children's eyes bleed, loosen them up in their sockets so that he could pluck them right out. And then...
Nah, that's the thing I didn't know about this story. I didn't know they post sand in your eyes, and it was supposed to be intentionally for a certain reason. But I guess we'll see and figure out the reason.
Bloody eyes in hand, he would take them away to the moon to feed them to his horrible children, who ravened for their next meal like a nest of hungry young owl chicks. After hearing this story, he was more than horrified. He was obsessed. He began to think he was hearing footsteps on the stairs behind him as he went to bed. Was it him? Was it the Sandman come to steal his eyes? It was all he could think about, day in, day out. He finally decided that he had to see for himself. So late one night, he hid near the door to his father's study, watching the stairs. And what he saw changed his life forever. The creature who'd been following him up the stairs each night was not some strange fairy or apparition. It was his father's friend, the old lawyer Coppelius, a huge, gnarled, wickedly grinning monster of a man whose very presence never failed to terrify him and his siblings. Surely he had been the Sandman all along. It only made sense in his child's mind. He watched in horror as, dressed in black robes, his father ushered the old man into his study. He watched as they proceeded through a hidden door into a secret room, as they fired some kind of forge within, as they worked through the night to shape strange humanoid objects within the flames, as they pulled them out to cool, great pits of darkness staring out from where their eyes ought to be. It wasn't until the old man demanded a pair of eyes from Nathaniel's father to complete the creation that the boy's fear got the better of him. He screamed out against his will and was discovered. In a fit of rage, Coppelius snatched Nathaniel out of his hiding place and declared that he had found a pair of eyes that they could use.
Wow.
Despite the old man's fury, his father was able to convince him to release the boy. But the damage had already been done. The Sandman had almost stolen away his eyes, like in the stories. His worst fear had nearly become a reality. And not long after, while Nathaniel was still trying to process this fresh trauma, something happened that would change this wound in his psyche to a wound in his soul. During another of these hushed visits, something went wrong with the strange project the two men were conducting. There was a wicked explosion in the study. When Nathaniel went to see what had happened, all he found was the ruins of the secret room and the blackened remains of his father's body. The old lawyer was nowhere to be found. Like his own personal demon, it seemed as if the old man had come for the sole purpose of ruining Nathaniel's young mind. That task accomplished, he had vanished from the boy's life. Until now.
Wow.
Coppola,
Tragic.
Coppelius, the name may be different, but Nathaniel would recognize this man anywhere. This glass merchant is his demon. The Sandman has found him once again. Or so he thinks.
As I'm in the midst of applying for residency right now, wish me luck, Grammarly has again been a lifesaver with my application.
Before he can fall too far into his old obsession, Clara, his fiancée, is there to offer him her wisdom and support. He explains everything to her, and in short order she's able to make sense of the whole situation. This Sandman, Coppelius, Coppola hybrid creature was surely just his way of coping with the cruel situation as a child. Not an actual boogeyman there to torment him. And his father? Likely just dabbling in alchemy, which is known to be fairly dangerous. The best thing for Nathaniel, she says, would be to put all of this as far from his mind as possible. The dark influence of Coppelius the lawyer or Coppola the glass merchant only act the way they do on him because he gives them such power. This should be a comfort to him. Unfortunately, Nathaniel just can't see it that way. He's able to confirm that Coppola is not Coppelius by way of a mutual contact, one Professor Spallanzani, a physics teacher who knows the merchant personally. It's something of early for him, but the encounter with his past has already started to change him. The vibrant, idealistic poet has started to become a fatalistic, miserable thing. He's surprised by Clara, cynical at her suggestions. How could someone with eyes so bright and childlike, he thinks, come to such a philosophical perspective on his past? The next time they speak about it, he tries some rationalizations of his own. He explains that, rather than an actual fantastical demon, Coppelius is simply an evil principle in Nathaniel's life, a guarantee that things will end in ruin for him, that he is already cursed and damned, that there is nothing he nor any other man can do for himself. He tries his hardest to win Clara over to this dark perspective, sharing with her certain mystic books he's read on the subject, gut-wrenching anecdotes he's heard, the things he understands of the demonic. When none of these work, he writes a long prophetic poem that encapsulates all his fears and doubts on a mere few sheets of paper. It does not have the effect he was hoping for. Clara rejects all of it. She calls the poem a foolish, senseless, stupid thing and tells him to throw it into a fire. Again,
Wow.
she tells him that the only power this figure has over him is the power which he gives it. This is all too much for Nathaniel. She simply can't understand him, can't see through her rationale to the reality of his dreams, his poetry. He calls her a damned lifeless automaton and runs away in tears. Despite all of this, the two still love each other. Perhaps they don't know how to proceed, but they do at least try. Clara is committed to him. She truly wants to be there for him through whatever all of this is. For Nathaniel, it's a bit more complicated than that. Because ever since he's met Professor Spallanzani, he's been cultivating a different obsession. A slow burn in the background. The professor's daughter, Olympia. She had been a rare sight for him, but he'd managed to catch glimpses here and there. A mysterious hole in the wall outside Spallanzani's home allowed him to see her sitting at the table, although he didn't mean to peep. From his window, he could see across the street into hers, although he never took ungentlemanly advantage of that. On exceedingly rare occasion, he'd even see her out and about with the professor. All of this is enough to know 3 things about her. 1, that she's incredibly, almost uncannily beautiful. 2, that the professor mostly keeps her locked up in the house, presumably for her own good. Because 3, she's an odd girl. Perhaps a little too well-mannered, a little too agreeable, a little too perfect? He notices Olympia. How can he not? Nevertheless, Clara is the first and foremost in his mind. Sweet, devoted Clara, who stayed with him through all his troubles, the one and only mistress of his heart. At least, until his second encounter with Coppola.
Join large-scale battles with military vehicles. The online action game War Thunder has received a major up.
As if on cue, right after Nathaniel and Clara have their small falling out, the merchant practically forces his wares on Nathaniel. He wants to sell Nathaniel what he calls, in his accent, fine eyes. Eyeglasses and spyglasses from among his wares. Mastering himself, remembering that this man is not the dreaded Coppelius, despite how much the mention of eyes disturbs him, he decides to buy a small, finely cut spyglass for himself. When he tests it out in his bedroom, without any intention, he finds that he's looking straight into Olympia's room, and through the detail of the lens, he sees her in a way that he never has before. Something seems to light up in her eyes. He feels as though her gaze is meant for him. In that instant, she becomes the most beautiful thing in his world, and he finds that he can't tear his mind away from her. Clara is gone, replaced by the strange girl sitting motionless in her room, eyes wide open. All is Olympia. As he begins to spend time with her, he finds that she is very unlike Clara. She never interrupts his poetry with rationale, never dismisses his romantic fantasies. In fact, she says very little at all, only sighing in fond agreement most of the time. As he reads his book to her, dances with her at balls and gatherings, speaks with her about his ideals late into the evenings, she becomes his angel of poetry, his muse. Despite his friends' misgivings, how much they dislike her, how strange they think she is, how they refer to her surreptitiously as Miss Waxface, he decides that she is the one, that he must spend his life with her. He wastes no time. Gathering his courage, he finds the ring his mother had given him and rushes to her house to propose. But when he enters, he's greeted by a strange sight. Not beautiful Olympia sitting peacefully at the table as usual. Olympia being torn to pieces. Coppola and Spallanzani are pulling her back and forth between them, arguing over whom she belongs to. Spallanzani shouts that it's his clockwork inside her. Coppola roars that her eyes belong to him. Before Nathaniel can do anything to intervene, Coppola tears the girl from her father and proceeds to beat Spallanzani over the head with her lifeless body before taking her away forever, vanishing for the second time from Nathaniel's life. And all Nathaniel can do throughout all of this is stand and watch, stunned. She had been clockwork and wax. She belonged to Coppola, at least in part. Where her eyes had usually been, this time there were only great pits of darkness staring back. As you may have guessed by now, Olympia was no more than a very elaborate doll, perhaps the very same kind his father had been making with Coppelius all those years ago. All that remains of her now are a pair of bloody eyes on the floor. The image of them is burned forever into Nathaniel's mind. Nothing can be quite the same after this. It's all too much for Nathaniel to handle. Mind as broken as the automaton he loved, he's dragged away to an asylum, screaming all the way, "Spin round, wooden doll! Spin round, fire wheel!" Spallanzani is forced to leave the university for his hand in Nathaniel's fate, and for fooling everyone with his unethical creation. The local men grow paranoid of their lovers,
Terrible.
asking them to sing and dance a little out of time, be a little less than perfect, just to be sure. Women are encouraged to speak their minds, make it clear that they are thinking for themselves, not just following mechanical programming. Olympia is gone. Coppola is gone. Spallanzani has been made an honest man. With these changes of circumstance, and with enough time, Nathaniel is, miraculously, able to recover, at least enough to leave the asylum. And as always, even after all he's done, after all his disloyalty and madness, his beloved Clara is there waiting for him. Under her tender care, he remembers how much he truly loves her. The Sandman spell seems at last to be breaking. Nathaniel is truly on the road to a life free of his childhood darkness. He decides that he will marry Clara after all, and together they attempt to put all that had happened behind them. They can have a future together. They even allow themselves to look forward to it, as if summiting the peak of their great mountain of troubles, ready to see a more hopeful vista before them. The two climb up to the top of the town hall's tallest tower together. And the view is very beautiful. The woods in the distance smell sweetly on the breeze. The hills rise up like a city of giants in the distance. Nathaniel takes out his spyglass to better take it all in. But when he looks through it, instead of the scenery, he finds that he's staring directly into Clara's eyes. And just as it had changed Olympia's eyes before, it changes hers now. They begin to roll about in her skull, flashing and sparkling with a fiery current inside them. And instantly, the darkness comes flooding back. Nathaniel begins to leap about in a frenzy, screaming the familiar refrain, "Spin round, wooden doll! Spin round, fire wheel!" Perhaps trying to end the madness, break the betraying wooden doll, smash the fiery wheel, he seizes Clara to throw her over the balcony. But by now, a crowd has gathered. Some of their friends arrive just in time to wrestle her away from him and prevent a tragedy. Or at least, one tragedy.
Spell was never
Because
broken.
when Nathaniel looks down at the crowd gathered at the bottom of the tower, who should he see staring at him but the Sandman himself, Coppola, Coppelius, his own personal demon, grinning back. Others around the old man suggest that they go up to apprehend Nathaniel, but the man only laughs and promises that he'll come down of his own accord. And sure enough, meeting Coppelius's gaze, Nathaniel shouts, "Eh, fine eyes, and hurls himself from the balcony. As if it were made of glass, his head shatters when it hits the ground. And now, for the last time, Coppelius turns his back on Nathaniel, vanishing into the ensuing confusion of the crowd. After all this time, Nathaniel is finally free of this dark influence. But look at the cost. That's the end of Nathaniel's story. But the tale itself actually ends several years later. Nathaniel isn't a part of it. Instead, we close with Clara. She's found a place at the side of a pleasant gentleman, and two bright boys play at her feet. Hoffman says that, freed of Nathaniel and his tempest-tossed soul, she is finally able to find domestic bliss, the peace she'd so craved. As tragic as his death and his life were, Clara can finally forget the past and all the darkness wrapped up in it. Her dreams no longer have anything to do with Nathaniel's nightmares. Kind of a bittersweet ending. Maybe we'd hope Nathaniel would find his way out of this manic spiral. But really, I think it's sort of important that he didn't, and that we see what Clara's life is like having escaped it. Fantasies can be this way when they crowd out reality. Like looking through a cursed spyglass, your preconceptions and ideals about how the world is or how it ought to be can easily pervert the world that you see, make it look different. And if you can't react to the world as it is, if you're interacting with a separate one which you've invented, there will almost always be some amount of pain involved. Those who protect your false world, the automaton dolls who agree and enable, will become beautiful to you. Those who challenge it, the beloved sources of clarity, you will see as tormentors. The dream, however terrible, may be easier to face, may offer you the benefit of false confidence or, like Nathaniel, a fatalism so profound it borders on euphoric. But I caution you, do not give your eyes over to the Sandman. He does not have your best interest at heart. On another note, Olympia is honestly one of the most interesting characters I've seen in a while. I mean, is anyone surprised that I'm interested in a story about a beautiful female robot? Not for her beauty, mind you, but for her humanity? Her perceived humanity? The qualities people project onto her? She reminds me a lot of one of my favorite books, The Golem and the Jinni by Helene Wecker, which is about a golem created to be a man's wife, but then he dies en route to America, so she's left alone in the new country, trying desperately to figure out how to be a good human. It is an amazing story, and I'm happy to say you can listen to it for free thanks to our sponsor, Audible. I know you're supposed to talk good about your sponsor, but Audible really is one of our favorite things. We use it constantly for our research and
I'm gonna just say, honestly, that is not the perception or the sight I've ever thought on the Sandman to mean. Now that I see the actual true meaning, or at least somewhat of it, I'm glad I don't really believe in a lot of these weird sayings or actually enduring them. Wow. But that's it with your boy SK74 Official. I'm out.